Senator Schiff, for a span of 4 years, you insisted to the American populace that proof of Russian conspiracy was clearly visible. The Mueller investigation discovered no such conspiracy, so my query is straightforward. Where is it, and where is the proof you guaranteed? Vice President J.D. Vance occupied the chair of the Senate's presiding officer, his physical stance at ease, yet his gaze piercing, reflecting a Marine trained to detect threats in minute particulars. Seated across from him at the testimony table was California Senator Adam Schiff, the individual who had dedicated 4 years to assuring America that their commander-in-chief was an asset to Russia. The evidence had never surfaced, but on this day, the falsehoods would finally face a reckoning. Adam Schiff tilted forward, a condescending smirk stretching across his features, as he had been awaiting this specific instant. Not with fear, but with eager expectation. He had devoted decades to dismantling his political adversaries, and a vice president from Ohio in his first term was not going to unsettle him. "Mr. Vice President," Schiff commenced, his tone saturated with disdain, "with all appropriate respect, a phrase I apply loosely, you have resided in Washington for roughly 3 years. I have dedicated decades to safeguarding the secrets of this nation while you were, well, composing memoirs regarding your difficult upbringing." A handful of Democrats laughed softly, and Schiff drew energy from it, his grin broadening. This is not a promotional tour for a book, nor is it Hillbilly elegy. This constitutes a matter of national security. He pivoted to perform for the recording lenses, gesturing with theatrical flair, stating that, frankly, he found it comical, or rather pathetic, that an individual with such restricted experience believed he could challenge a record of service to the country. He reclined, arms folded over his chest, projecting an air of self-satisfied arrogance, inviting him to proceed and instruct him on intelligence affairs, as he could utilize the amusement. The Democrats clapped, genuinely offering applause, while Senator Warren bobbed her head in agreement, recognizing the Adam Schiff they knew, the attack dog, the hero of the resistance, the man who had confronted Donald Trump and survived. Vance offered no reaction, his facial expression staying completely unreadable, resembling a card player clutching an unbeatable hand. He merely unclasped the heavy binder resting before him. "You are correct, Senator. I do not possess decades of history in Washington. I possess only these." He elevated the binder, displaying transcripts and interviews, your specific words captured and maintained for posterity. 4 years of guarantees, 4 years of assertions, and 4 years of untruths were contained within. He placed the binder back down with a gentle thud, proposing they examine how his experience might account for them. The laughter ceased immediately. What Senator Schiff failed to comprehend was that J.D. Vance had dedicated months to getting ready for this juncture, aggregating every interview, every declaration, and every vow into one devastating chronology. The inconsistencies were on the verge of being entered into the official congressional log, and there would be no defense of satire available this time. Vance turned to the initial sheet with the unhurried calm of a man who understood precisely where this path led. "Let us set a foundational point," he stated, his Appalachian inflection smoothing his syllables in a manner that rendered them strangely more threatening. "March 22, 2017, on CNN, you stated, and I am citing you exactly, that you could say the proof of conspiracy is beyond merely circumstantial." At that moment, he glanced up at Schiff, noting the phrase, "beyond merely circumstantial," as bold language from the Intelligence Committee chairman. Schiff gestured with a wave of rejection, insisting the evidence at that period plainly showed something, but Vance interrupted, his voice steady, yet commanding enough to halt Schiff mid-phrase. July the 2nd, 2017, on MSNBC, you are quoted as saying there is distinct proof of conspiracy. Turning another page to December 10th, 2017, on ABC News, the quote reads that, "The proof of conspiracy is lurking in open view." Turning yet another page to February 2018, on Face the Nation, the quote asserts there is abundant proof of conspiracy in open view. He placed the pile down, noting at least 24 transcripts, stating he could proceed, Senator, as he possessed hundreds of statements from 2017, 2018, and 2019. They all asserted the identical allegation, that you possessed evidence, evidence surpassing the circumstantial, and evidence lurking in open view. Schiff let out a scornful snort, remarking that if the vice president possessed any grasp of how intelligence operations truly work, he would know better. Then, ignoring Schiff's interruption entirely, Vance stated that on April 18, 2019, Robert Mueller published his findings. He lifted the heavy document, comprised of 448 pages, representing 2 years of inquiry, unrestricted subpoena authority, 19 attorneys, 40 FBI agents, 500 warrants for search, and 230 orders for communication logs. He turned the book to a flagged section and read the verdict from page 2 of Volume 1, stating the inquiry failed to prove that members of the Trump team conspired or collaborated with the Russian state in its election meddling efforts. He dropped the report with sufficient force to cause the microphone to bounce, emphasizing the words, "Did not prove, no conspiracy, no collaboration." He stared straight at Schiff, posing his query. "Senator, you informed the American public for 2 years from your seat as Intelligence Committee Chairman that you held proof. Mueller evidently failed to locate evidence that was supposedly hiding in plain sight. Either you possessed evidence that a special counsel with boundless assets failed to find, or you were speaking falsehoods." He opened his palms, asking which scenario was accurate. Schiff's complexion flushed red, as he was unused to direct challenges, particularly not from an individual he deemed inferior. "That constitutes a severe distortion," he snapped, arguing the Mueller report was intentionally restricted in focus, targeting criminal plots rather than the wider trend of worrisome contacts visible to anyone with sight. "So, the proof you guaranteed amounted to merely worrisome contacts," Vance remarked, his brow lifting slightly. "You appeared on national broadcasting as the Intelligence Committee Chair and informed Americans the proof was beyond circumstantial, yet you were referring to worrisome contacts? The American public interpreted your words to mean you claimed to possess evidence that their president was an operative for Russia." Vance's tone became more cutting, noting they placed faith in you due to your office, believing you because they presumed you viewed classified briefings unavailable to them. You abused that confidence to assert claims that Mueller, utilizing every available asset, failed to verify. Schiff rose suddenly, pointing a finger at Vance, demanding how he dared lecture him regarding trust. "I safeguarded this nation while you were doing whatever you were doing," Schiff shouted. "You safeguarded it from what?" Vance's voice sliced through the noise like a sharp edge. "Did you protect it from the conspiracy that never existed? Or the plot Mueller failed to uncover? What precisely did you save us from, Senator, other than the reality?" A person in the media section whispered an expletive in shock. The phrase traveled farther than meant, and Schiff's finger shook in the atmosphere, his complexion shifting from red to a shade nearing purple. "This constitutes a biased witch hunt," he sputtered, claiming Vance was attempting to make legitimate congressional supervision illegal. "I have not charged you with any offense." Vance's tone lowered to something nearly tender, resembling the gentleness of a surgeon performing a cut. "I have posed a query to you. You guaranteed evidence. Mueller discovered none. So where is it located?" The quiet lingered for 5 seconds, then 10, then 15. Schiff resumed his seat with a heavy motion, his respiration audible within the silent room. The evidence, the sequence of contacts, the entirety of the situation, he mumbled, unable to complete the phrase. Vance jotted a note on his tablet, stating for the record that Senator Schiff, following 4 years of pledging proof of Russian conspiracy, failed to provide any when directly queried. He grasped another binder, proposing they now discuss the whistleblower. I possess several inquiries regarding your interaction with that person. Schiff's head jerked upward, and a flicker appeared in his notoriously prominent eyes, the initial indication of authentic dread. Subscribe to witness what occurred when the whistleblower falsehoods were raised. Vance unsealed his second binder with the exactness of a prosecutor advancing toward his primary exhibit. September 17, 2019, on MSNBC Morning Joe, he said, withdrawing a transcript. You were queried if your committee had been in touch with the whistleblower prior to the complaint's filing. He commenced reading, his voice monotone, allowing Schiff's own phrasing to inflict the harm. Host asks if you had any contact with the whistleblower, and your reply was that we have not conversed directly with the whistleblower, though we would wish to. Vance glanced up, repeating that we have not conversed directly with the whistleblower. That was your declaration under studio lighting to millions of American citizens. Distinctive and unmistakable. Schiff adjusted his position in his chair, claiming that at that moment he was alluding to direct personal interactions. October 2, 2019, Vance said, displaying a newspaper cutting. The New York Times front page banner read that the whistleblower reached out to the Intelligence Committee prior to submitting the complaint. He placed the clipping down, noting that per the Times, the whistleblower contacted your staff before filing, your staff offered counsel, and your office was aware of the contents before the complaint became public. His tone became rigid, stating that on September 17th, when you claimed you had not spoken directly with the whistleblower, your team had already convened with him, guided him through the procedure, and viewed what was approaching. He tilted forward, asserting, Senator, that is not a misunderstanding. That is a falsehood spoken on national television to conceal the roots of an impeachment. Schiff's self-control shattered. He rose once more, this time wearing a look of injured indignation he had refined over decades. I refuse to sit here and be charged with this, as this is precisely what dictators do. They assault the investigators and defame anyone brave enough to speak truth to power. His voice escalated nearly to a scream, insisting the whistleblower was a loyal citizen who hazarded everything to reveal misconduct. And you wish to torment them. He pivoted to his fellow Democrats, arms extended broadly, declaring, this is what we cautioned against, representing revenge and retribution. A handful of Democrats bobbed their heads, and Senator Warren appeared ready to interject. Vance paused until the reverberation of Schiff's yelling had vanished entirely. The quiet that ensued was crushing. Senator, he stated softly, I did not inquire regarding the whistleblower's loyalty. I inquired about your declaration. You stated your committee had not communicated with the whistleblower, which was untrue. Were you aware it was untrue when you uttered it? I was alluding to direct personal interaction, Schiff stammered. You utilized the word we, referring to your committee and your staff, which encompasses individuals employed by you. Vance's tone was tolerant, nearly benevolent, resembling the voice of an instructor clarifying a concept to a confused pupil. Even if we admit your imaginative interpretation, which no rational individual would, why did you fail to rectify the record? You generated the perception that this was an impulsive complaint from an unattached citizen. It was not. It was synchronized through your office. Schiff clutched the rim of the table, arguing the content of the complaint was confirmed. I did not inquire regarding the content. Vance sliced through the diversion like a surgical knife. I inquired regarding your declaration, true or false, when you stated, "We have not communicated with the whistleblower." Had your staff already synchronized with him? The response emerged choked. There were initial conversations that I was not involved in. The description relies on yes or no, Senator. Silence followed, and from somewhere in the audience came a noise, someone suppressing a chuckle, followed by another. The ridiculousness of observing Adam Schiff, the master questioner, incapable of answering a basic query, was overwhelming. Vance had not concluded. There is another matter that confuses me, Senator. During the impeachment sessions, Congressman Jordan attempted to ascertain whom Colonel Vindman had spoken with regarding the Ukraine call. Vindman listed several individuals, then mentioned there was another person he refused to name. He stared straight at Schiff, noting you intervened to halt the questioning. You stated, and this is within the logs, that this committee will not be utilized to expose the whistleblower. Vance opened his hands, observing the catch. Vindman had testified he was unaware of who the whistleblower was. You had stated repeatedly that you were unaware of who the whistleblower was. So how were you safeguarding someone's identity when neither of you claimed to possess knowledge of who they were? He allowed the inconsistency to hover in the atmosphere, suggesting, unless, naturally, you did know, and you have been speaking falsehoods about that matter as well. A sharp intake of breath came from the audience, and someone dropped their telephone with a clatter. Schiff's complexion had turned ashen under the hearing room lamps. Sweat was noticeable on his brow, and his hands, resting on the desk, had started to shake. You are distorting the principle of whistleblower safety requires, he stammered, unable to finish a solitary sentence. Senator Feinstein, Schiff's most long-standing ally in California politics, rose silently and moved toward the exit. She uttered nothing, nor did she need to, as her departure conveyed everything. Schiff observed her leave, a glimmer of treachery traversing his face. She had commended him on MSNBC just the previous week, but now she could not escape quickly enough. Vance jotted down another note, stating for the record that Senator Schiff was unable to clarify why he shielded the identity of a person he claimed not to know. He grasped a third binder, remarking that they were not finished yet. Let us discuss September 26, 2019, the hearing where you read a synopsis of the Trump-Ukraine call into the congressional log. He elevated the binder, referencing the synopsis that proved to be entirely invented. Schiff reached for his tumbler of water, his hand trembling so severely that liquid spilled over the edge, dampening his documents. However, wait until you hear about the satire defense. Vance opened the third binder, this one stamped with the official emblem of the congressional record. September 26, 2019, House Intelligence Committee hearing, the inaugural hearing of the impeachment inquiry, he said, extracting a transcript. Before the witness could give testimony, you presented opening comments, and in those comments, you read what you characterized as a summary of the president's conversation with President Zelensky. He looked at Schiff, stating, "I am going to read what you said." These words are kept permanently in the National Archives. He commenced reading, his voice monotone and detached. This is the gist of what the president communicates. I want you to fabricate filth on my political rival. Understand? Lots of it, on this matter and on that matter. I am going to place you in contact with people, and not just anyone. I am going to place you in contact with the Attorney General of the United States, my Attorney General Bill Barr. He has the entire weight of American law enforcement backing him. Vance placed the transcript down, noting, Senator, those words never existed in the genuine call transcript. Not fabricate filth, not lots of it, not any portion of it. President Trump had made public the actual transcript the previous day, so everyone could observe what was truly spoken. He held up two papers side by side, asserting you did not summarize the call. You invented a dialogue that never occurred. You performed this during an official congressional hearing, the initial hearing of an impeachment process against the President of the United States. Schiff sat upright in his seat, regaining some of his arrogance. "Mr. Vice President, I plainly declared at the time that my comments were a parody," he stated, his voice adopting the didactic tone that had enraged Republicans for years. It was apparent to anyone possessing a functioning mind that I was demonstrating the essence, the corrupt essence, of the call. If you or your backers were too unrefined to comprehend that, a parody. Vance's voice turned to ice. You read invented quotes into the congressional record during an impeachment hearing, and your defense is that it was a satire? It was plainly presented as, "Senator, permit me to clarify something." Vance rose gradually, not with drama, but with the purposeful motion of a man illustrating a point through action. When I attended Yale Law School, I learned that words spoken in official proceedings possess significance. They become a component of the permanent record, cited by historians and kept for generations. He elevated the congressional record, stating this document will persist in the National Archives eternally. It holds invented quotes credited to the President of the United States, read by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee during the most grave proceeding Congress can attempt. He placed it down, asking if your defense is parody. He walked deliberately toward the front of the room. "Let me ask you something. Conceive if I came to this Senate tomorrow and read an invented quote from you, something you never uttered, something that made you appear as a deceiver and a fraud. And when you objected, I replied, 'Relax, Senator. It was parody. Everyone understood.'" He turned to confront Schiff, asking if you would accept that justification. Silence followed. Would any tribunal in America accept that justification? Would any reporter accept it? Would you accept it from a Republican doing it to a Democrat? More silence followed. You would not, and no one would, because it is ridiculous. Vance's voice lowered. You are not permitted to lie in official proceedings and label it parody when detected. You are not permitted to invent presidential quotes and assert you were demonstrating the essence. That is not how congressional hearings function, nor how the law functions. A Fox News reporter in the gallery was smiling so broadly it appeared painful, knowing he would headline the evening news, while CNN's reporter had his head buried in his hands. Schiff attempted to recover, stating, "This is precisely the type of bad faith assault I would anticipate from—" "Bad faith?" Vance pivoted sharply. "Senator, you invented testimony, read fiction into the official log, and presented falsehoods as truth during an impeachment hearing. And when detected, your defense was that everyone should have realized you were lying." He shook his head slowly, recalling that my mama used to say when someone reveals who they are, believe them. You have told us precisely who you are, Senator. A man who lies when it is expedient and terms it parody when he is caught. He went back to his seat, stating, "But those falsehoods had repercussions, tangible repercussions, and that is what I wish to discuss now." One by one, Democratic senators started discovering reasons to exit. A telephone call, a gathering, a restroom break that would not conclude within 5 minutes. The Democratic side of the room was half vacant. Schiff sat solitary at the witness table, encompassed by allies who had fled. Like and share before the final blow. This is where everything shifted. Vance placed aside all his binders, and when he looked up, the systematic prosecutor had yielded to something more personal and raw. This was no longer regarding transcripts. This was regarding consequences. "Let us retreat from the specifics," he said, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow occupied the chamber more fully than any scream could have. "I wish to discuss what your falsehoods cost this nation, not politically, but humanly. I was raised in Middletown, Ohio, a working-class town with families battling addiction, joblessness, and hopelessness. The individuals I grew up with did not track every turn of the Russia inquiry. They had employment if they were fortunate, bills to settle, and children to rear. However, they knew when they were informed by you and by people in your station. They knew their president was an operative for Russia, a betrayer, a man who had sold his nation to Vladimir Putin. That is what you told them, Senator, for 4 years on every network, and in every interview with all the weight of your office. And they believed you. Why would they not? You were the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, possessing access to secrets they could not view. If you stated there was evidence lurking in plain sight, who were they to question it? Vance rose deliberately, asking if you know what that did to this country, if you have any concept. He walked toward the witness table. I know families who ceased speaking to one another over Russian conspiracy, brothers and sisters who have not conversed in years. Parents are estranged from their offspring. Marriages ended, and friendships of decades were destroyed because half the nation believed what you told them, and the other half knew it was untrue. There was no middle ground any longer. My own family, Senator. I had kin who stopped speaking to me because I backed the president you labeled a traitor. People who assisted in raising me when my mother could not are gone because of the schism you helped generate. He halted directly in front of Schiff's table, and when Mueller's report was released, when it turned out there was no conspiracy, did those families mend? Did those relationships recuperate? He shook his head, stating they did not, because by then words had been uttered that could not be retracted, and lines had been traversed that could not be untraversed. And you never apologized. You never conceded you were incorrect. You simply moved on to Ukraine, to impeachment, to whatever would keep the cameras focused and the indignation flowing. An elderly woman in the audience, someone's grandmother, was weeping quietly, tears running down her aged face. She had lived it. She had lost someone to the division, and now she was watching the man responsible face repercussions for the first time. Vance turned to speak to the entire room, asking while Senator Schiff was pursuing his conspiracy fantasy, "Do you know what was occurring in America?" Fentanyl was flooding across the southern boundary, with 100,000 Americans perishing annually. Every year, more than Vietnam, more than Korea, a September 11th every 2 weeks. He whirled back to confront Schiff. Where were the congressional hearings regarding that? Where was Adam Schiff demanding responsibility for 100,000 deceased Americans? His voice elevated for the first time, stating nowhere, because fentanyl fatalities do not get you on magazine covers. They do not make you a hero of the resistance, and they do not earn you standing ovations at Hollywood galas. He walked back toward his seat, his voice lowering again. China was constructing islands in the South China Sea, enlarging its military, pilfering our technology, and positioning itself as the dominant power of the 21st century. And what was the House Intelligence Committee, your committee, doing while America's greatest strategic rival was preparing to replace us? He turned sharply, noting you were on CNN, Senator, night after night, guaranteeing evidence that did not exist. You were chasing a conspiracy theory that Mueller, with every asset available, could not corroborate. He sat down and looked at Schiff with something nearing pity. I took an oath to defend this nation in Iraq. That meant risking my life. It meant watching comrades die, and it meant making decisions I will carry forever. His voice dropped to barely a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the room. For you, apparently, defending this country meant appearing on cable news and lying. It meant inventing quotes and calling them parody. It meant synchronizing with whistleblowers and denying it. And it meant promising evidence you did not possess to a public that trusted you. He leaned forward, stating you desired to be the man who brought down a president, the hero who saved democracy. You wanted to be the face on magazine covers and cable news panels. And in pursuit of that ambition, you divided this nation in ways that may take a generation to mend. Schiff attempted to respond. His mouth opened, his lips moved, but no sound emerged. He reached for his water again and knocked the tumbler over. Water spread across the desk, soaking his documents, but he made no move to halt it, merely staring at the expanding puddle as if it were the most fascinating thing he had ever viewed. The threat from Russia was genuine, he finally managed, his voice barely audible. The interference in our elections, Senator, nobody disputes Russian interference. Vance's voice was almost gentle now, noting the question is whether the president was a Russian operative. You stated he was for 4 years, and it was not true. He gathered his binders into a tidy stack. Do you know what the difference is between us? In Iraq, when I was incorrect about something, people died. Real consequences, real accountability. I had to live with every error. He stood, stating, you have been incorrect about everything for 4 years. Russian conspiracy, wrong. Whistleblower contact, lied. Fake transcript, fabricated. And what happened to you? He gestured around the room. You got promoted, you got a Senate seat, you got book contracts and speaking fees, and cable news appearances. You failed upwards, Senator. Every single time. His voice lowered to barely a whisper, stating, but not today. Today your words are in the record. And today 60 million Americans watched you unable to defend your own statements. Today, you finally faced something you have never faced before. He turned to walk away, then stopped to say, consequences. He left Schiff sitting alone, surrounded by scattered papers, an overturned water glass, and the wreckage of a reputation that had taken decades to construct and 90 minutes to destroy. Schiff did not move. His hands trembled visibly, and his shoulders had collapsed inward as if he were attempting to make himself smaller. The famous intensity in his eyes had been replaced by something vacant, the look of a man who had finally run out of words, run out of deflections, and run out of lies. A photographer captured the image that would define the conclusion of his career. Adam Schiff alone at the witness table, water dripping onto the floor, papers scattered, not a single ally remaining in the room. The cameras kept recording, and they would record for a long time. What Vice President Vance exposed in that Senate chamber went far beyond one politician's falsehoods. He exposed the structure of a system designed to manipulate public opinion through institutional authority, and the devastating cost when that system is abused. Adam Schiff was not merely a congressman who made false statements. He was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, one of the most powerful positions in the American government. When he spoke about Russian conspiracy, he spoke with the authority of someone who had seen classified evidence no ordinary citizen could access. That is what made his lies so uniquely destructive. Americans trusted Schiff because of his position. They believed his claims because they assumed he knew things they did not. When he said evidence was hiding in plain sight, they did not think he was speculating. They thought he was revealing what the classified briefings showed. He exploited that trust systematically for years, knowing that the classified nature of intelligence work meant his claims could never be immediately verified. It was the perfect deception. Assert with authority, hide behind classification, and when the truth finally emerges, simply move on to the next accusation. This was not partisan politics. This was something more corrosive, the deliberate abuse of institutional credibility. For 4 years, Adam Schiff operated in a zone free of accountability, saying whatever served his political interests, secure in the knowledge that no one would ever make him answer for his words. That era ended in a Senate chamber with a Marine from Ohio reading transcripts and asking simple questions. The statistics of division do not capture the human cost of Adam Schiff's deception. Consider what it meant to live in America from 2017 to 2020. Half the country believed, based on what people like Adam Schiff told them, that the president was literally a Russian operative. The other half believed, based on the evidence, that this was a politically motivated hoax designed to overturn an election. There was no middle ground, no room for nuance, and no space for reasonable disagreement. You either believed the president was a traitor or you were complicit in treason. That was the choice Schiff's rhetoric created, and families shattered along those lines. Parents stopped speaking to children, siblings became strangers, and marriages crumbled under the weight of political disagreements that had become existential. The Thanksgiving dinner arguments were not about policy differences. They were about whether America itself had been betrayed. How many of those relationships ever healed? And how many fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, brothers and sisters still do not speak because of wounds inflicted during those years? When Mueller's report found no conspiracy, the damage did not reverse, the families did not reconcile, and the trust did not return. Adam Schiff never acknowledged any of this, never apologized for his role in the division, and never expressed regret for the families torn apart. He just moved on to the next accusation, the next investigation, the next opportunity to be the hero of the resistance. 2 weeks following the hearing, a journalist intercepted Vice President Vance at a gathering for veterans in Columbus, Ohio. The video clip was still ubiquitous. Vance forcing Schiff to answer for his falsehoods had become a cultural phenomenon, viewed over 100 million times across all platforms. Mr. Vice President, do you believe Senator Schiff will ever recuperate from this? Vance pondered the inquiry, his expression contemplative. I do not know. Washington possesses a method of shielding its own. But I know this. 60 million Americans watched him unable to explain his own statements. They watched his allies walk out of the chamber rather than defend him. And they watched him sit in silence while his falsehoods were read into the record. Some things you do not recover from, not because anyone destroys you, but because you finally get seen for what you are. The reporter pressed, noting some people say you were too harsh, that you should have shown more respect to a fellow senator. Vance almost smiled. My mama used to say, do not be so polite that you let people walk all over the truth. Adam Schiff walked all over the truth for 4 years. He did it from a position of power with the authority of his office, and he divided this nation in ways we are still dealing with. That deserves something more than polite conversation. It deserves accountability. And accountability is not always comfortable to watch. The reporter asked if there would be more hearings or more investigations. There will be accountability, Vance said simply. Not revenge, accountability. There is a difference. Revenge is about making people suffer, while accountability is about making sure they cannot do the same thing again. He gazed out over the assembly of veterans, men and women who had served their country without seeking fame or magazine covers. These people sacrificed for something larger than themselves. They did not do it for cable news appearances. They did it because they believed in this country. They deserve leaders who believe in it too. leaders who tell them the truth even when it is hard, and leaders who do not exploit their trust for political gain. He shook his head one final time. Adam Schiff believed in himself, in his ambition, and in his television career, and he was willing to tear this country apart to feed that ambition. He started to walk away, then paused to say, "That is not leadership, that is vanity," and 60 million Americans finally got to see the difference. He walked into the crowd of veterans, shaking hands, sharing stories, and connecting with people who had served as he had served. Behind him, on a television in the corner of the event space, the clip played again. Vance calm and relentless, reading transcripts. Schiff unable to respond, watching his water spread across the table like his reputation spreading into oblivion. The question that could not be answered: where is the evidence you promised? The silence said everything. Somewhere in California, in an office where the telephones had ceased ringing and the interview requests had dried up, Adam Schiff sat alone with the consequences he had spent a lifetime avoiding. They had finally caught up with him, and they were not going anywhere. If you believe the truth matters more than political convenience, remember the families that were torn apart because of lies.